Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everyone. This is Good Advice Helps with Dr. Allan Gold. He is a man who spent many years as the district psychologist at Reed Union School District in California. And ever since we've gotten together with him, we've gotten so much feedback from parents worried about their children, dealing with some challenges there, psychological challenges, but then also from people looking to be in that field, whether it's a psychologist or a school psychologist. We're going to dig into more today and your feedback. And so great to have him back. Allan, how you doing today?
Okay, thank you. Fine. How are you?
Fantastic and gratified that we can help others with your help.
Me
Um,
too.
Instant feedback, Steve at gmail.com. If you ever have a question and want to check in. And Renee in Austin has done just that and says, sometimes it's hard to tell if my kid is having a rough patch or if there's an underlying learning or attention issue. And she says, what are some early signs that parents should look out for and also when it's the right time to get an evaluation or talk to a school psychologist? So essentially, concern about whether there are learning issues or whether maybe it's ADHD, ADD, attention challenges. What's your thoughts?
Okay, very good question. It really depends on how old the child is. If the child's under 8 years old, um, there could be she or he could be a little slow in learning, and in learning how to control uh, his or herself. Um, However, learning disabilities show up fairly early because nowadays kids are beginning to be taught to read in kindergarten, um, and certainly first grade. And if the child is showing some real difficulties with learning letters, both visual and auditory, because dyslexia is both. You have auditory problems where you can't associate a word or a letter or letters with a particular sound, can't combine the sounds, can't remember a sequence of sounds. Um, those are all auditory problems. Then there's the visual problems. You can't recognize a sight word that you've learned before. Um, so like in my school district, what they did fairly early on, even in kindergarten, would have some non-special ed reading support or math support for kids who seem to be struggling with just learning the academics. So you learn to read from about kindergarten through second or third grade, and then after that, you read to learn. You're able to read, and so you learn more specific things.
Hmm.
Uh, so I think it's important that a parent has a good relationship with the teacher. How concerned is the teacher with the progress that the child is making? Is there slow progress? Is there no progress at all? Does and then you also can worry about comprehension. Um, because I think we all know about intelligence, and sometimes and parents have a very, very difficult time accepting the fact that their child may have a low IQ. And, you don't know that until you're tested, but, um, sometimes the rate of learning is just very slow, and that's because the child doesn't have a strong intellectual ability. And I've certainly worked with parents with that, and that's one of the hardest things for parents to accept is not having a bright child. Everybody wants to have a bright child. But with learning disabilities, they can be, when learning how to read, that's the first one that really shows up. And if the child is having difficulty learning sounds, combining sounds, then if they if the school provides some kind of um, special ed support, just some normal support. And then, like in our district, kids who had that early support and were not making progress, then we would move on to assessing them to see if there was a learning disability. But if they did begin to make progress, it just meant that they, weren't quite ready to learn these skills, and eventually they did. In terms of attention problems, that's another very good question. The general feeling is that, if a kid is 7 or younger, they might very well be energetic and not be able to um, control their attention, and if it's hyperactivity, their physical movements. Um, but after that, I used to assess kids probably starting in third grade, because by that time, the average child has been in school for 3 years and they understand discipline. And if they, then if they can't focus on the teacher, if they can't focus on their work for at least 10 minutes or something like that, I'm not talking about hours at this point, but um, then, and if also they're showing that same kind of lack of attention at home, if the mom or dad says, "Hey, I want you to, clean up your room and then brush your teeth and then go to sleep," or something like that. And if they can't remember two or three directions, "What did you say, Mom?" That kind of thing. Then there's an indication that there may be some problems. If the kid's always interrupting, and can't control his or her voice, says impulsive things. But if they're younger than about 7, then that's not so abnormal. But once they have had, 3 years of school and they're used to the routine, and their parents expect them to listen to instructions and can at least remember, you know, a couple of instructions, um, and not interrupt all the time, then there may be some indication that there's an attention problem there. Now, some kids, many people with attention deficit disorder, have this hyper focus on something. So they may, if it's something they really, really like, which could be a video game or something like some activity that they're doing, and then their attention looks very focused. But if it's something that doesn't draw their attention, then but they need to focus, particularly schoolwork, or chores and things like that at home, then there's some indication that there might be an attention problem. So that would be the time to and question the teacher, and then go ahead with an assessment with a school psychologist.
You know, I look at it as a parent, not to worry so much. Many times, we go into the fear mode. Well, what if my child has an issue that well, I remember my really good friend, 7-year-old son was bouncing all over the place. And I don't, know if he had an attention issue, whatever it might have been. My friend didn't worry so much about it. He went on to do well in school, and he is now in his mid 20s and a high level executive at a major fast food restaurant chain at headquarters for that restaurant chain.
Hmm.
Uh, Easily worked himself up. But I got to
Yeah.
tell you, in the beginning, and that's when my children were younger. And I would look and I'm just like, oh, boys are crazy when they're little.
Yeah,
Run
yeah,
all
no,
over the
it's true.
place.
Well, that's why I said that, but underage 8 or so, and particularly boys too, can be, very energetic, and it looks like they can't pay attention. But if it doesn't gradually decrease,
Mm.
and they really can't complete work, they're distracted all the time at home by one thing or another. they can't sit still for more than a minute or something, then you start to worry about it. But there are energetic kids too, and and adults, and if they can control themselves enough to accomplish what they need to accomplish, pay attention to other people. Another um, unpleasant effect of ADHD as kids get older is in the social realm.
Hmm.
Um, because kids they want other kids to listen to them. They want them to play, pay attention when they're playing sports and all that sort of thing. And they get less and less tolerant fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh grade, and they get pretty intolerant of kids who are very impulsive, say things without thinking about the impact of what they say, can't pay attention to games that they're playing. So it does build up, but when they're young, you're right, and parents shouldn't be overly concerned about it.
Mentioning boys for just a moment, I heard that many times younger boys are, if we will, crazy. They got a lot of energy all run around because they've been from the beginning in our society tasked with not showing emotion. Hey, come on, big boys don't cry. Ah, come on, Junior, man up. And they hold that inside and they don't know what to do with it when it comes to that emotional energy where girls let it out, they'll cry, it's
Right.
encouraged.
Yeah.
Do you think that has something to do with why younger boys might be a little more energetic?
I think so. Yes, it's one way that boys learn to express their emotion just by being active.
It's got to
Uh,
come out somewhere.
It's got to come out, and it doesn't usually come out verbally.
Mm,
Um, Although I certainly have seen young boys and encourage them to, in working with them, in
sure.
a counseling situation, I really encourage young people, young boys to be able to express their emotions.
Yep.
And I've had, many boys who have been able to do that, privately, but then they don't want to be made fun of. And, I mean, we've got these stereotypic views of what boys are supposed to be like,
Yep.
boys don't cry and all that sort of thing. But I've seen that change, in the past maybe 20 years or something. Um, and again, it depends on the family values and the culture. But it's important for people to express their emotions, you know.
So let's go to another one. By the way, you can reach us instant feedback, steve@gmail.com. This is Lena in Toronto says, I'm currently studying psychology and really interested in working in schools. How do you manage your own mental health and avoid burnout when your job is so focused on helping others? Are there specific strategies you use to decompress or keep perspective?
Well, that is an individual choice that people need to make. Um, I, th- I certainly strongly recommend individual therapy for any psychologist, whether they're in private practice or school psychology. Um, because you need to decompress. You need to talk about some of these things. You may need help and guidance with how to handle things. You need to not be very hard on yourself. I mean, it's one thing to have high standards and to try to solve, difficult situations, but being self-critical and being very hard on yourself doesn't help. That all that does is add stress, and having a personal therapist can really help with that. Um, it's important to know when you're really tired and what kind of activities can
Mm,
uh, make you feel better, whether it's listening to music, doing some physical activity, taking a bike ride or a hike, being with friends, having a hobby, just having some quiet time. And, the tricky part is, when you have deadlines, which you sometimes do in school, particularly with special education. You've got 60 days to assess a kid, write a report, and have an IEP meeting, an
Mm.
individual education plan meeting. So there are some deadlines, but as a student, you have to learn not to procrastinate because that only makes you more stressed out.
Can I?
Um,
I want to ask you a question, right? That when you talked about the IEP and all of that,
yeah,
in in your line of work, if you are in a private practice, you kind of do your own thing.
yeah,
In a school setting, you have to adhere to certain rules
right.
and guidelines and things like that, which I would think adds a little layer of challenge. There are expectations, you have reports, you have accountability, and all of that. But on the flip side of that, the positive aspect of being in a school environment is when you're trying to help a child, you can also connect with staff, teachers, others who deal with them and bounce it off of them. So now you've got something else to work with. So, the give and the take is seems like it's there, but would you say that, looking at the big picture, again, meeting with colleagues, other teachers, and see how they're seeing this student as you try to help them. Do you feel like that there's a lot of benefit there in that?
Oh, absolutely. That's one reason I stayed with my job for so long because of
Hmm.
the cooperative element and the teamwork. You may be looked at as the knowledgeable person, but you get data from teachers. I always loved working with the resource teachers who were the actual teachers for kids with special ed. We would combine our reports, we would discuss their findings, my findings. Yeah, that was a huge benefit. You don't feel like you're just in a room by yourself trying to figure this all out.
Sure.
Uh, and that's why I strongly suggest, even for private practice therapists, to have their own therapist because they will come up with situations that they may not know how to figure out, and just having that um, dialogue to brainstorm, to reflect, that's extremely useful. But
Hmm.
another thing that I enjoyed in my district because it was a small district and I sort of had flexibility. So I think one thing that made me really happy was to find other things to do to engage kids that might have been my own interest. I remember I taught rock and roll dancing at the middle school back in the 80s or something like that, during lunchtime. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
I,
Probably right around the time the movie Footloose came out, too.
yeah,
You know?
probably. Uh, just like if you have a particular interest, I mean, it even could be video games or something. If you set up a club, I mean, I collect stamps. I was thinking of doing a stamp club at one point, but more, I did set up a club, Gender Sexuality Alliance Club for middle school kids, where kids who were questioning their own gender identity or their sexual orientation. We met uh, um, once a week for
Hmm.
lunch, and before that, I set up another club to discuss. Um, I forget the name of it now, but the all kinds of different groups and um,
Well, you even identified before, too, that you set up a club for students with parents going through divorce so that they
oh
can
yeah,
support each
yeah,
other.
yeah. So I mean, those are all
Yeah.
meaningful kinds of things, and the taking advantage of may happen to be in a class. I remember years ago, I wasn't in my job for very long, maybe just a few years. I walked into a fifth grade class, and the teacher was talking about sex education, and I thought, well, that's interesting. Why don't I hop on that. And so for years, I mean, for the rest of my career, I would talk to the boys. This was fifth graders, and uh, the teacher would do boys and girls together, and then I would do one session just with the boys, and then usually the female teachers would meet with the girls and answer their specific questions. So, you try to take advantage of things that might, or like, because I had a math background and I set up math clubs. For
Hmm.
35 years. So, and they weren't stressful. It was something to do, something I enjoyed doing, something to address kids' needs who um, may may not have been addressed by anybody else at school. I mean, I like
Hmm.
to, challenge high performing math students. So we would have contests and practice with, um, difficult kinds of math.
Yeah, Alan, I'm thinking now when I think back to high school and junior high, one of the most for me, and if I question my schoolmates later in life now, I think they'd say the same thing. One of the most impactful things was those clubs. There were all different ones. You would pick the one that would work best for you. Me, I was part of the AV club. Yeah, I was
Oh,
the
audio
geek squad.
visual. Yeah.
And what am I doing now?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So it paid off. And lots of friends that were into science are now engineers, and they would be at, call it the science club. But there was something about the association and the connection. Yeah, going to school and going to class and yeah, and it's all good. But there was more of a teacher newspaper club. I wanted to be a syndicated cartoonist. Mr. Stroud, remember him well. He was like a hippie dude with purple glasses, and never forgot him. But that was a club, and I took all that I learned and that camaraderie and all of that, and use that later in life at a marketing agency in terms of
Yeah.
graphics.
Yeah.
So impactful. I don't think you realize, or maybe you do, in those clubs that you created, those connections, how it helped. How it helped.
And not only does it help the kids, but it actually helps you. If you're running a club in some
Hmm.
area that you really enjoy, it could be a gardening club. You know, all the ones you mentioned, and I was thinking about, some teachers did that. So something that's relaxing and they don't necessarily they have to maybe organize it, but they don't have to solve, serious psychological problems, and they're supporting both themselves and students, and
Yeah.
it's relaxing at the time. It's not like a hobby or hiking or socializing with friends. You can actually do that for, even if you do it for a half an hour a week.
Yeah.
And I always recommended to my interns that try to find something that you really enjoy doing and find, a half an hour a week that you can do that. And that helps your own psychological uh, kind of stability and comfort.
There's so much going on there, for both sides, the teacher or advisor and the students. It's this camaraderie, there's
Yeah,
connection,
right.
socialization, learning new things. Listen, I would not be the person I am today without Ms. Jeslak and that AV club, because she was a librarian, and I now got a flashback that back then, the year was 1980, she allowed us to buy high-end professional video equipment. And back then it was like $4,000, 5,000, which was a lot of money back
A
then.
lot of money back then. Yeah.
That was the game changer. But she saw and she fought for it, and she saw what the potential was and why it was important. And my point here is I don't think uh, many of those people in those roles in schools realize the impact they made on their students later in life. I've seen it with you, even talking to Jessie, that student that you met when she was in fifth grade. Now she's in her 20s, and you guys still connect and you
Yeah.
still support her. Just beautiful. Thank you for today and all the insight. I want to throw out again. You got a question? Doesn't matter if you're a parent with some challenges or somebody looking into the psychology field, reach out. Instant feedback, Steve at gmail.com. Alan, as always, thank you for being here today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.